If you love exploring whiskey, watching YouTube videos like this and buying your own bottles is a great place to start. Another option is joining a whiskey club. Now, from tasting clubs to bottle subscription services, there's a lot of different options out there. So we're going to explore some of the whiskey club options in Australia to help work out what's best for you. Hey there, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whisky Scribe. Since 2014, I've been a member of a whisky tasting club, and it's allowed me to sample some fantastic whisky, often rare and out of production or ahead of public launch, and sometimes often whiskies that I wouldn't normally try but absolutely loved. I've also made some amazing friends with people who share my passion for whisky. Now, please note, I'll be focusing on Australian clubs and subscriptions because that's where I'm based and what I'm familiar with. But if anyone's interested in international subscriptions or even virtual whisky tastings, please let me know in the comments below. I would be happy to explore that. Now, before I get into it, today I'm drinking the Bushmills 10-year-old single malt. This has been aged in bourbon and sherry casks and is a beautiful whisky. It has some wonderful chocolate notes in there, as well as some apple pie and malt. It featured in my 5 affordable whiskies video because it's a freaking steal at $71. I'll also add my tasting notes to Instagram. But back to whisky clubs. Now, some of you might want that post-pandemic social interaction. Others might just want to explore whisky on your own or with a small group of friends. Luckily, there's a few different whisky club styles in Australia, from whisky tasting clubs to bottle subscription services, but which one's right for you? Now, whisky tasting clubs are usually a small, local community group that organises monthly or quarterly whisky tastings in a group setting. There'll usually be one person responsible for putting together the selection of whisky, who'll present it, talk about the distillery, how the whisky was made, and give you some guidance as to what sort of flavours you're going to get from that whisky. They'll often also encourage members to discuss the whisky amongst themselves and also even give it a score. There is a process to this kind of whisky tasting, and I have a beginner's guide video that explains it. While these clubs will often have seats available for visitors, and visitors are welcome, members will usually pay an annual fee, and then as a result they get a discounted rate for their monthly attendance. So what are the benefits of this kind of club? Firstly, there's the social aspect, just meeting and making friends with people who have this shared passion for whisky. I've made some lifelong friends with people from all different walks of life that I would never have met if it weren't for a whisky club. Secondly, it's comparing notes. So tasting is completely subjective. Everyone's going to get a slightly different experience with every whisky. But sometimes when one person finds a flavour in their whisky and they mention it, you can go looking and you'll find that, and you wouldn't have otherwise known it was there. Lastly, and probably the most important point, is exposure to new whisky. If you're exploring whisky yourself and buying a new bottle every week or month, every now and again you're going to come across something you don't like. And now you've got a whole bottle of it. It's a bottle you're probably never going to drink. And as a result, next time you go to buy a new bottle, you're going to be hesitant to go outside of your comfort zone. When you're attending whisky tastings, the lineup is often based on some common theme, whether it's a region, whether it's a type of whisky, a distillery. Either way, you're going to be exposed to whiskies that you wouldn't normally drink. Sometimes you won't like them, and that's fine. You don't buy those whiskies. But sometimes you'll also be exposed to a whisky that you never would have tried and you absolutely love. And now you've got this whole new avenue to go down. You might start exploring whiskies based on a new barreling option you never thought existed, or a type of whisky you never would have tried. And it just opens up the world of whisky so much more for you. That's pretty consistent with most whisky clubs. In my personal experience, I've found some other great benefits. And the first of which is rare whisky. Some of these older clubs have a collection of whisky that has been steadily growing for years, curated by the most knowledgeable member of the club. These collections often include rare whiskies that are no longer in production, or possibly even whiskies that have gone up considerably in price since they've won awards for being fantastic whiskies. I've had the good fortune of being able to taste whiskies that I definitely wouldn't have been able to get a hold of were I not a member of these clubs. The other benefit is whisky reps. Whisky clubs provide a great audience for whisky reps and distillers to present new whiskies and get feedback. So by being a member of a club, you may actually get to experience whiskies before they've been released to the public, as well as hear stories directly from the distillers about how the distillery came to be, how the whisky was made, and some other news about what's going on in the industry. Basically, you'll be in the know, you'll have the guidance of other whisky lovers, and you'll have some insight as to what's happening in the world of whisky. So one of the whisky clubs available in Australia is the Queensland Malt Whiskey Society, or QMWS. Now, I've been a member of this club since 2014. They currently have 6 SEPs throughout Brisbane and they're steadily growing. Now, most of the clubs charge around $80 to $100 a year for membership, and then they have monthly tastings that members pay $25 to $40 to attend. Now, keep in mind, at each of these tastings, you're having 5 quality whiskies that retail at various prices. So if you attend 6 tastings a year, you're still going to get to try 30 different whiskies. And if you're paying the higher end of those fees, that's still only $11 a dram, which is pretty good value. So some of the other tasting clubs available in Australia include the Bundaberg Whisky Club, the Newcastle Whisky Sniffers, the Tasmanian Whisky Appreciation Society, the Malt Whisky Society of Australia, which is based in Adelaide, as well as Dram Full, which has locations throughout the country. I'll include links to each of these clubs in the description below. Most of these clubs will allow visitors to attend, so your best option is to find the club closest to you, get in touch, and organise a night where you can come along and check it out. Your other whisky club option is that of the bottle subscription services. Now this is where you sign up as a member and each month they'll send you out a different bottle. Now each club offers something a little bit different, but they share a lot of similar benefits. The first of which is that members are alerted as to what bottle is coming that month and they're given the option to opt out. Now that means you don't have to pay for a whisky every month if it's not to your taste. They'll also have cask exclusives. Now this is where the club has purchased a barrel of whisky and they've bottled it under their own label. It's called a cask exclusive because the whisky comes exclusively from the one cask. So there's a limited number of bottles that are only made available to members. Thirdly, they might offer discounts at some participating whisky bars throughout the country. And lastly, there will sometimes also be private member-only whisky tasting events. These are optional extras that are ticketed. Some of the clubs offering this service in Australia are the Whisky Club, which is free to sign up, and their monthly bottles range from $100 to $300. There's the Single Malt Whisky Club, which is also free to sign up, and they range from $120 to $160 a bottle. And the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Now this one does charge $120 to sign up, but they're the Australian chapter of an international club that only offers independent cask exclusive bottlings. Whisky bottle subscriptions are a pricier model than whisky tasting clubs, but you do get a full bottle that you get to take home, and you still get that exposure to rare and limited whiskies. So they're a great option for people who want to build up their own collection. Now, if you're not ready to commit to a club, in most major cities and even a few regional hubs, there are standalone whisky events. Many venues will hold one-off whisky tastings, and these will often be hosted by whisky reps or even distillers on tour. You can find out about these by either signing up for the bar's newsletter or following their social media accounts. In Brisbane, you can follow an account called Brisbane Whisky Scene. This account posts and promotes a variety of whisky events happening throughout the city. There are also annual expo events, things like Whisky Whiskey, Whisky Live, and the Indie Spirits Festival. Even the Queensland Malt Whisky Society holds an annual Whisky Expo. Members of whisky clubs will usually get offered discounted tickets for these kinds of events. I'll include a link to these expos in the description below. And if there's no whisky club options in your area, start your own. All you need is a small group of people that are just as interested as you. Buy a bottle and get together to share. You can do this weekly, monthly, or whenever you've got the time, but all that really matters is you get to share the experience, and you'd be surprised what can grow from there. That's my take on whisky clubs, but I'd love to hear how you get to explore whisky. So if you're a member of a club I've managed to miss, or there's another whisky event in Australia I didn't mention, for the love of the dram, please let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, but enjoy what's in your glass and slange.
Chug, 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 chug.
Now, if you go down this route, why do I keep saying route? It's rooted. Now, when you've had a whisky club going for... Diana said cut.
She did say cut.
Tasting clubs to bottle subscription services, there's a lot of... blah.
Blah.
Blah. Let's take it seriously this time.
But not too serious.
Not too seriously, though.
Indy is judging you.
I deserve to be judged. Each of these clubs offers something a little different, but the benefits...
But there are some benefits they all share.
Each of these clubs offers something a little bit different, but some of the benefits...
Just say it the way I want you to say it. I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yay! trying to hype up. Please don't use that in the bloopers.
Oh, but it was so good. You look like a little baby.